So I cancelled my Disney Plus subscription last week. Suddenly, and then after the event, realised that was quite on trend. The kids are very upset about it, as you can imagine. But we just weren't using it. But anyway, then I Googled it, or something cropped up, and it turns out that loads of people are cancelling their Disney Plus subscriptions because of some law case. You'd heard about this as well.
Yeah. Someone had visited Disney World, hadn't they? And they had an anaphylactic shock, having been told by the waiter that there was no nuts or shellfish or whatever it was that was the allergy. And apparently the husband now can't sue.
So she died, the lady affected died, and he's got a case against the restaurant and Disney, because the restaurant, to be clear, is on a Disney property, but it's not their own restaurant. So he included them in the case. And they used as their defence the fact that he'd signed up to a Disney Plus trial some years ago, and in the terms it says that you have no recourse to a jury. You can't take them to court. You have to solve all disputes by arbitration, even not relating to the trial. So I thought, blinking heck. I wonder how many people realise that they've signed up to these sort of clauses, which then stop you being able to sue companies. So I did a bit of research on that. Turns out Walmart have used it. They've got a similar sort of clause in theirs, and they've used it successfully. They've used it in defence, went right the way to Supreme Court. And Airbnb have used it as well. And another company used it, some sort of direct selling type company, but because they'd been bought by AT&T and the person had signed up to an AT&T mobile phone contract years before, AT&T had then bought the company that owned this direct selling company, so they said, well, we're now covered in that clause.
Crazy.
That's something else, isn't it?
We've probably signed ourselves away to all sorts of things with all these agreements and things that we're
Well, it makes you look
signing up to.
Yeah, I challenged it recently. I signed up for one of these appointments online this afternoon to find out about solar panels for the house, and I had to sign some agreement, accept their terms, which accepted that if their workmen do any damage to my property while installing them, that I can't claim for that. I think I'm only ringing up for a quote. It's a bit extreme.
Well, I did a thing once where I took the terms and put them into ChatGPT and got them to summarise it and say, tell me anything in this that I need to know.
Oh, that's a clever idea.
So, it's not foolproof. It's, by any means, it's not legal advice or anything.
Without prejudice.
Without prejudice advice. But it was helpful in terms of having something else summarise it quicker than I could.
Yeah, exactly. No, good idea. Well, it's a start. Compared to the fact that most people do nothing.
And I suppose you could maybe train your own little GPT to look for certain things if you knew what to look for. That's part of the problem with this. It's going to pick up things that just it thinks is interesting rather than things that might be relevant.
Yeah, you've probably got to do a bit of research then on the types of things like this Disney/Walmart/Airbnb thing. But apparently this might go to Supreme Court, and there's now talk that they may be able to outlaw the use of them, where it's being used much broader than the original agreement would have been reasonable to assume.
I suppose at any rate you could do a search in the terms for arbitration, and if you found...
Yeah. What can you do? If you want Disney Plus, you can't say, can you do a separate set of terms for me? It's take it or leave it, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I'm cancelling our Disney Plus, but not because of the terms.
Well, it turns out loads of people are cancelling it for all sorts of reasons. They're clamping down on password sharing. Elon Musk has fallen out with their CEO because he's stopped advertising. Here's a quiz question for you. How much do you think Disney spends on advertising all year round across all platforms?
200 million?
7.2 billion.
Oh, wow.
$7.2 billion a year globally. Unbelievable. So clearly with people like them and Apple and IBM and all deserting X, brackets formerly Twitter, you can see what has Musk done. But that's a whole other episode. Where we're going with that. Right, before we get too down that rabbit hole, we better start a podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. And here we are again. Richard's with me. Hi, Rich.
Hello.
We've had a few weeks of holidays disrupting our schedule, haven't we, recently? But we're back again. Sorry for anyone who was looking for their fix last week. That was our week off. As ever, though, let's talk about the last three episodes that we've done, just to remind everybody in case they missed them. Certainly, if you've been on holiday, hope you've had a good time if you have. But you'll have a bit of catching up to do now, because there'll be the SME Growth Podcasts in your inbox to catch up with. So what was the last one?
Episode 82. I think that was, we were sort of away again, so it was another little bit of a sneaky summer episode where Pete put a compilation together of our greatest hits.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of podcasts doing this, so we were not alone. But well done, Pete. Actually, it came across very well. Short little summary of
10 tips
points
for business leaders for 2025.
It did look as if we both changed shirts every 30 seconds for about half an hour. Very good. That was good. That was episode 82.
Episode 81 was when you had a guest in, Pete White, because I think I was away.
Yeah, Pete was good. We were talking about the CrowdStrike Falcon, was it, or what it was called? The antivirus thing that went wrong, and it caused all this lockdown all over the world with airports and GP
5 days
surgeries.
before I went away, so that was okay.
Got it out of the system.
Got it out of the system.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it all sorted.
But that made everybody think then, well, what should we be doing? And also about the PR not handling very well bit coming out of the back of
lunch
that.
voucher, wasn't it, or something they gave everybody.
£10 lunch voucher for everybody. Thought that wasn't particularly good.
The IT teams appreciated that.
Yeah, exactly. And then the one before that was episode 80 about non-execs, which, given that that's a large part of what we do, we'd been a while till we got around to talking about that. But we are non-exec chairman for a lot of different companies and have been for over 100 companies over the last 10, 15 years across the Midlands. So we talked a bit about that, didn't we, and how non-execs
Managed to fill about half an hour.
just about fill half an hour from nearly 20 years experience. Fill it in. So they were the last three. So today we're on episode 83. And what we thought we'd talk about today was a subject that cropped up the other day, actually, when I was talking to another company about all very well having all these inbound marketing strategies, but don't forget that there's a balance needed and you still need some outbound, good old-fashioned business development work. And this generated quite a good discussion, actually, with this particular chap. So I thought, well, we'll cover that off a little bit and just talk about that.
Yeah, I've got my views on inbound.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of sort of scene setter bits. So that is a good opportunity for you
Before
to give your
rants.
views on inbound. How long do we give you? A whole half an hour on that. But I did want to point out that there's been that court ruling against Google.
Yes.
That's just been handed down in America in August, a couple of weeks ago. The case has been running for over a year, and it's an antitrust case that the DOJ in America brought against Google for the fact that they were locking out competition. Yeah. And the court found against them. Sentence or sanctions or whatever it is going to be is still to be decided upon next month, apparently.
And no doubt there'll be an appeal or something, won't there? But
So there'll be an appeal and all that sort of stuff. But depending how it goes, that could quite drastically change search. How drastically, I'm not quite sure.
well, allegedly or factually, they paid $18 billion or something to Apple, didn't they?
Yeah,
Google?
talk about quiz question facts. How would you guess that? Just to have the right for Google, to be the default search engine within Safari on an iPhone, $18 billion just for someone to flick a switch. I mean, that shows how much it's worth, right? Yeah. And yet then in their defense, they say the only reason people use Google for search is because it's the best search engine. Well, why did you spend $18 billion to persuade them then? Because they were going to find it, right? That kind of defeated their own argument. So that's sort of happening in the background. So if you're relying on search and bringing people to your website, that's about to change. So don't rely on it forever. But go on then. You've got views on
I suppose the other thing to note as well, even if you're in Google, have you seen a lot of the AI summaries, AI generated summary now? So you type something in, I don't know, tell me about inbound or something, and rather than it going to a load of web pages with here's our summary of inbound, it's giving you that AI summary. And I'm finding, just personally, that probably 8 times out of 10 it's giving me the answer that I'm looking for. Yeah. If it's if it's not product based, but if it's just information. Yeah. And I wonder, well, how much will that just kill off search anyway? Because that almost seems to be cannibalizing their own search results by putting an AI summary right at the top. I'm not scrolling.
What's it going to do to their advertising model? Because most of the traffic coming to our website is around our board meeting expertise. We've been talking about it for 20 years, and we're very well ranking, thank goodness, in the UK anyway, for support of board meetings. But imagine if you typed in a question, just generally trying to find out about it. You wouldn't have ever heard of Wellmeadow, perhaps, and you just, how do I run a board meeting, or what are the key points, or where could I get a standard agenda, or what's it for? And then in future, instead of it coming up with Wellmeadow as it does now, with a link to our ebook to download and read all about it, it just gives you an AI summary, which could well have been trained on our content, as well as that content from lots of other people, but it wouldn't necessarily cite us as a source, would it?
But that's what it's doing at the moment, isn't it? That's why I think it seems an odd thing for Google to do. I mean, I guess everyone's got to keep up with this AI trend, but at the same time, if you're hoping that people carry on scrolling down the page when they've already got the information they need, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. That'll do. Just a quick. Yeah. So, I mean, like I say, maybe if you're looking for a particular product or a holiday or something like that, then it's not so applicable, but it is an interesting thing to ponder.
Well, the other thing that I think we found as well, using form fills to get gated content, is that you're not getting your customer profile, your ideal customer profile, filling those in. You're getting all sorts of people. It could be students. Yeah. We've had quite a few people contacting us with follow-up inquiries, wanting to know more about board meetings, but they're doing some sort of business administration course in Nigeria or something. And great, it's nice that we can help people all over the world with this from a theoretical point of view, but it's not a marketing activity. That's just a bit of, helping people who want to know what we know about. So there is a question that if you're relying on inbound and attracting people's attention with the content that you've got, then you have the illusion of people filling in forms and downloading it. But we've seen loads of competitors of ours download it, don't they? Consultancies are always downloading it.
Yeah.
Which is flattering, that they do it, but they're never going to become a customer. We're just helping other people develop the same expertise.
Themselves. But I think the whole question around inbound is an interesting one. I think probably 20 years ago, 30 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, when people were writing ebooks, it was much more of there was less knowledge around on the internet. So if you had some expertise that you could gate, then that was a great lead magnet.
And not many people were doing it.
In
fact, remember we used to talk about it. Don't be shouty. Don't be outbound. Don't just talk about your new employee or your new site or your award for this, that, and the other. Give something useful and interesting that's content that people want to read. But now everybody's doing it.
Yeah, and I still think that's relevant in terms of what the content is. Again, nobody really cares about new employees or whether you've won a gold sticker at some event or something.
Yeah, 10 out of 10.
So it's got to be valuable content. But now everything is so swamped. There's lots of people are doing their own versions of ebook or that type of thing. I think AI has done a pretty good job on
almost too good a job
killing that off.
Yeah,
as well.
A good job of that. I mean, look at what HubSpot's recently released with its content whole hub that it does now. And it's great if you're a starter or a small scale team in marketing and you want to leverage its tools. That's great, but it just means you've made it available to so many people. Yeah. You can now put a reasonably shortish bit of contribution. It will then remix that and repurpose it for all the different channels and create a podcast from it. For goodness sake, once everybody does that, what's the point of us sitting here warbling on? Doing a good old-fashioned podcast when someone's got a bit of artificial voice.
So I think is inbound dead? I don't think it's dead, but I think it's not what it used to be. And I think maybe years ago you had that opportunity to really showcase your expertise and drive leads. And I think it particularly works where you've got big B2C purchases. So the classic example is the swimming pool sale or jacuzzi or something like that. Whereas now there's so much information. If you wanted to get a hot tub, you don't need to download an ebook. You just go on YouTube and watch a couple of videos about what you wanted, and you'd see it in real time, and you can do all that. So I think it is changing, which leads on to what we're talking about today in terms of, well, if inbound is no longer, it's still part of the mix, but maybe in terms of percentages, it's the scales are tipping.
It's not even 50%. It's definitely it's a smaller part of the whole now, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a bit like maybe having a website. It was a validation project to say, yeah, we're real, we exist, this is us. Sure. I think there's a little bit of that where with inbound is, yeah, we've got some ebooks which shows that we can do this stuff, but if you're relying upon it, I think particularly in a B2B context, to drive in leads quickly, then I think maybe that day is over.
Well, it was never quick, was it? That's certainly for sure. Maybe in some B2C markets it might have been. If you caught people, you mentioned the swimming pool example, and for anybody that doesn't get that reference, that's Marcus Sheridan's book, isn't it, when he wrote They Ask You Answer. And we did a book review on that. And in its day it was very successful, but it wasn't fast. And as we've said, in B2B contexts, it takes a long time for that type of inbound content to get you traction.
And I think a lot of B2B buyers nowadays probably know what they're buying. there's more expertise.
Do more research on it. Yeah.
So
that's true. So instead then, and this is where the discussion came from when I was talking to this chap from a machining company up in the northeast, and he's taking on staff internally to drive more of an outbound biz dev sort of process. And we were talking about how HubSpot can support that, which of course it can very well. It's a very good CRM in the middle of all that. But you need to start out with knowing who it is you're trying to sell to, unlike just waiting for them to fill a form in. And the problem, as we said earlier with form fills, is it's already a self-selecting group, not only those that have searched at all and found you, but those prepared to give an email. Not everybody in your market would be prepared to do that. So as we agreed, you've got to start out with your ideal customer profile. Who is it you're trying to sell to? How big are they? What industry are they in? I've seen some ICPs include even how many people there are in a certain department. If you 5 people in the marketing department or 3 people in engineering or whatever. That's interesting, as well as just turnover and whatever else you can find out. So you need to know the ICP, as they call it, the ideal customer profile, but then match that up against your territory and try and come up with a list of all the companies that match your ICP, which I guess you could call market research. Yeah. And that's a function of marketing, right? Marketing is supposed to do market research, and yet so few of them do. How many marketing companies have we come across recently that have done a really good piece of market research? Yeah. They're all doing, managing the Twitter account and doing the website and doing the email campaigns, running an exhibition.
It's probably not seen as sexy, is it, compared to a lot of the modern
I think it's a different skill set as well.
Yeah.
A lot of people that go into marketing are very creative and they like telling stories and they understand brand. But market research is a very data hungry sort of piece of work, isn't it? And it's quite investigative and actually quite hard work.
Yeah. But foundational, like you say, because it's all part of that. Who are we talking to, and are we talking to the right people? And back to kind of bang for your buck and efficiency, there's no point spending money on campaigns that are going to people that aren't going to ever be.
And one company that did this very well, Graham, who we both know, he has a very clear set of 30 target customers for each of his salespeople. And he's listed them and he monitors how much activity there's been trying to engage those, not customers, prospects, 30 companies that they're trying to get into for every salesperson. Now 30 is quite short, but they're a very high tariff B2B sort of customer, aren't they, in that particular company. But I wonder how many companies have got a very clearly defined list of who would we love to have as a customer, not generically, not ICP, but actual company names with a company contact, phone number, email name, whatever within it. So that's where this conversation really started. Let's at least find out, based on the ICP, matching that up against all the companies you can find out about and the databases that exist. Who is it? List of companies, list of names that we would like to get on board as customers. And then what you're doing with them. How are you going to do that? So that's the hard work bit we said. And you might decide to outsource that to some degree. You might take on a student or an apprentice or hire a temp for a while to do stuff. But even then it's hard work. Are you going to email the info at address at that company? Are you going to ring them up? And certainly if it's worth it, you'd probably ring them up, establish a rapport early on. But you couldn't do that if there's thousands involved. But if you're talking about that 30, 50, 100, maybe.
And it's interesting to think in the days of marketing automation as well, which we would extol the virtues of. This is almost the other side of not quite the other side of the coin. It's maybe a different coin, but one that you need to spin that metaphor into something that to mangle the metaphor, as it were. But this old-fashioned biz dev approach is hard work, isn't it? It's the wear out.
Well, in the old days, it used to be the shoe leather. I was going to say, the tyres. When you go to an industrial estate, let's say, and find a target customer, look around who else is nearby, or ask everybody who your suppliers are, or who your competitors, or go to a supplier and ask who else do you supply. It's that sort of almost detective work to say who's out there. Now, you can do a lot of this with databases, and if anybody's looked into Zoom Info, for example, it's not cheap, but they will purport to provide this sort of data. And, everyone has to find out for themselves whether that works for you, whether that gets good data. So there's sort of shortcuts around it, or other paid databases. But you can't quite beat that effort of going for yourself, looking up the companies, ringing them up, or getting someone to ring them up, or contact them in some other way, even if it's on the contact form. But really make a concerted effort. So if you wanted 50 new customers, who would they be? Well, at least get that list.
Yeah. Start defining who that is, and then
for the very high priority ones.
And then you can start working out from that automation point of view and sales prospecting, and what tools are there then to make sure that you can effectively hit those 50, because I'm sure we've all seen it before where you do go through this exercise and you get your 50 top customers, and then you get to that point and think, that's great, we've got our 50 targets, and then 6 months later you're looking at it and there's no activity, or there's you've got to have that then implementation strategy to say, how are we going to then start to get into these companies? How are we going to
I'll just give a quick shout out while we're on that subject of getting the details in the first place, because there's a couple of apps or browser plugins that we use quite effective on this. People may have heard of Apollo IO or Hunter. These are services that come up with emails from names or whatever. But there's a really neat plugin that connects that behind the scenes. You don't have to have an account with them. It does it all automatically, but connects that onto your LinkedIn, a browser page showing a LinkedIn page. Now it's a Chrome extension called Hub Lead, and it links in beautifully well with HubSpot. So you open up a LinkedIn page with this extension in the browser, and it sort of hijacks the page a little bit, and it puts an extra bit of code in, if you like, which puts a new section in the LinkedIn profile of a person that wouldn't normally be there. And that allows you to add that person into your HubSpot directly, which is really neat because you can do that for free. But then there's a paid for bit where you can press a button and it'll do that Apollo or Hunter lookup to find the email address. So you can, once you've got the company name, go to the company LinkedIn page, look at the people, find the key people you want to add into the database, add them in, and then look up their email address. So it's still manual work, get someone to do it. So I just wanted to close that one out in terms of the how to get the details. But then back to your point, okay, you've got this list then that we should be going at. What are we doing then? What's our strategy? And that's where a lot of people sort of fail. They've done all the hard work and they think the rest will happen by magic, but it often doesn't happen.
No. I suppose there's still some hard work in the actual outreach strategy, isn't there? Yeah, for sure. That's still there is a lot you can do around automating these things, but then you're into that debate around, well, do you want to automate some of the initial outreaches, or does that need a personal touch? Some of that will come back to your ICP and who you're actually targeting and all of that. What type of people are they? So again, it's worth doing that exercise. So that
I think the problem there as well with some of those automations, they're badly implemented. So the two things within HubSpot that relate to this are sequences and workflows. And a sequence is a sales outreach function that allows you to stack up a series of emails that will get sent at periodic times that you define to one person. As soon as you get one of them responded to, it stops sending anymore, and you've made your contact. But I've seen so many poor implementations of that just look so cliched. I'm trying to get in touch, and then the second one, just bumping you back to the top of the inbox again, and the third one, you may have been on holiday, just following up. Can I grab some time in your diary? And it just doesn't come across as authentic. That's not how you would write an email if you were writing it yourself. So think about that when you're doing these things. So that's the sequencing bit. If you do that another way, maybe you just write a direct email to somebody, not using any automation, but just try and outreach them. You've got to then remember if they don't respond to do something, which is where the automation comes in. But then the workflows side is having got someone's email address, you send them something on a periodic schedule that doesn't get interrupted by response. And that's more likely to be something that people wouldn't always respond to. But as long as they've had it in their inbox, you've put your name in front of them again. So like a newsletter every month, 3 months, 6 months, whatever you want, or a don't forget we're here type of email, something like that. Yeah. So you can automate that to some degree. But my sort of warning to people is think about that carefully to do it well, and don't make it come across as if you just lazily employed some automation.
And again, that goes back to the ICP of thinking about, well, what's the pain points? What are the challenges? How are you going to help overcome those? By incorporating those into the emails or whatever the outreach is, then that's a way of actually adding value for that process rather than just saying, can I have a meeting?
And maybe segment your list of target accounts, assuming you've put that into your CRM somehow and you've flagged them as target accounts and given your sales team owners of different people. For the very top level, maybe it's 10 or 20 or whatever per salesperson, then they should be more of a phone call based thing once you've connected. Yeah. And I've got a couple of recruitment consultancies that know that we work with lots of different companies, so they see us as valuable potential introducers over the long term. And I've never clocked when it happens, but I get a reasonably regular phone call sort of every 6 months or so from the MD of one of them, just checking in. How you doing? How's business? Not at all trying to sell their services, but just reminding you that they're there and that they care about you and how's it going on and what have you got going on, and you can ask them in return. So just having that good old-fashioned conversation remind yourself to do that at least for, we can all do 10 every 6 months, surely, if not a few more.
Yeah. Well, it's relationship building, isn't it? Networking, relationship building, old-fashioned.
But it's amazing how few companies do that, because they're so prioritised on looking after their existing customers and doing the farming stuff rather than the hunting. Or even when they're chasing an account, they get one and convert it, they carry on treating them as if they're still a prospect, when in fact they've bought now, so they need to go into a different process, nurture them differently. Well, that brings us on to looking after your existing and your lapsed customers as well, because it's all very well focusing on getting new ones added to the pipeline, but you've got to keep in touch with existing for sure. But the lapsed customers thing has always amazed me, that people don't really treat that. They think once someone's a customer, that's it, they're fine, they know about us, even though they may have last bought from you 3 years ago or something.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one to have some metrics around, isn't it, as well? Just to say, what's the average time since somebody was lapsed, and is that just growing? If that's increasing, then do we do something about it in terms of, why haven't they come back? Would be an obvious question, depending on what type of business you've got. If you're one-off purchase, then maybe that's why. But there may be other opportunities in that.
Yeah, if you knew what frequency you'd expect to get orders from a customer, then work out what your threshold is above that, and then at least use the automation to prompt you to do something without necessarily sending it to them. There's a workflow in our CRM which prompts every time there's a closed lost quote, a deal that got to the closed lost stage. So we submitted a proposal, we marked it as closed. 6 months later, it prompts us to say, it might be worth just following up. If you didn't go with us last time, or the project didn't go ahead, how's that worked out? Is it all going okay? Maybe if the project didn't go ahead, you're now thinking about it again for next year's budgets, or maybe you chose a provider that didn't quite work out and you're looking to switch horses. So that's the idea of the prompt, if you like.
Yeah, and that's almost not treating your lost data as truly lost, is it? There's stuff that can be mined out of it and extracted from it. That's
it was lost at the time, but it's still a chance that something comes back.
I think I was noting this. I returned a garment, a holiday garment, unused, I should add.
Holiday garment. That's an interesting
pair of shorts. I ordered 2 sizes, and just I like to say the smaller size fit. So that was
I'm glad
that was encouraging.
Prep for your beach board.
Exactly. Well. Yeah, exactly. And but just the whole process of taking it back, and then the text messages and the money it just made me really think about the whole customer service side as well, and how important those communications are, and how seamless it was, and actually how it made me think, do you know what, I would buy from them again, just because that process was so seamless and easy. And I think that's something where people, we're all guilty of. There's a lot of effort goes into winning the sale, then as soon as you've won it, are we then guilty of, we've got that one, on to the next one type of thing, and the service levels? But that's something worth thinking about as well.
Well, I think that's right, and you've probably got to make a decision there when somebody has a problem with your service. Are they likely to possibly be a customer again in the future? In which case you'll probably gain more from not trying to go for the short-term gain and refusing a refund, or putting a return charge on the garment, whatever it may be. Whereas you see other companies that almost give up on you once you've, some software subscription services, for example, if you're an annual contract and you cancel halfway through, you do not get a refund. And they know that's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth. We've seen that with clients of ours that have had various services that they've tried to cancel. But they almost have taken a view that, well, they're never going to come back. We might as well, stick to the contract we've agreed for now and get the rest of the money out of it. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Okay, so then I just wanted to close out on thoughts of metrics. If you're trying to do this sort of activity, then you don't want to be focusing on all that vanity stuff. How many followers we've got, how many form fills have we got, how many downloads of our ebooks have we got, all those sorts of things, because that's the old inbound way. Yeah. To really drive this behavior on outbound, maybe even a number. How many companies have we got in our target account list where we actually have an email address? Do we actually know? Are we chasing 100 people or 1,000 people or 10 people? Yeah. And who owns those? And then what have we done with them? If we said we're going to send them all an email every 6 months or give them all a ring, have we done?
And even mapping those, so so there's another good plugin for HubSpot.
The physically mapping, geomapping, yeah.
Well, the geomapping one, but the organizational mapping as well. So you can see who's particularly if you've got a number of people who are going to be involved in the selling process or the buying process, depending on which side you're on, then it's having that kind of mapped out so you can see, okay, well, who's influencing this? Who am I speaking to? Where are they in the hierarchy of decision making?
Who's the final decision maker? Who are the potential blockers? Exactly.
And actually having that kind of profile of a company, so you could have a metric around that. What's the intelligence that we've got on that particular target account?
Yeah, and if there's gaps, who's tasked with going to fill in the gaps?
Find that out, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So lots of thoughts there. I think the summary of that is that whilst inbound isn't dead, it's not the be-all and end-all. Not that necessarily ever it was, but I think people clung to it as a great way of not having to do the hard work bit. And the hard work bit is still required, that biz dev, outboundy stuff. And even then, it's not just about blasting LinkedIn with loads of updates on your company. You've got to know a list of companies, who owns them, what you're doing about them.
You've got to put some intelligence into it, haven't you?
Yeah.
Actual intelligence, not artificial intelligence.
Actual humans. There's still a role for us here somewhere until that gets automated as well.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, hopefully people listening to that might have a little bit of a second thought on how they're doing their biz dev, building their lists and targeting companies that meet their ideal customer profile, their RCP.
Got to get on the hustle.
Yeah. Thanks, Rich. That was a good episode. Thank you very much. Thanks again to you too for listening or watching if you have the latest episode from the SME Growth Podcast from Wellmeadow. Each week we try and come up with something interesting or useful for you as business owners and managers. And as we ask you every week to do, if you know of anybody else in business or any of your friends and contacts that might be interested in our content, please give them a nudge. Either send them a link to the show notes, send them to the SMEgrowthpodcast.com website, or just tell them we're here and let them find it by searching SME Growth Podcast online. Thanks a lot again for listening, and good luck with your business.